Howdy, folks. Welcome back or welcome aboard. You are listening to the Campus Connection by Doc Owen Show. I am Doc Owen. I'm joined in the studio by Miss
Amateur Fire.
There you go. This is our show dedicated to youths, dedicated to the young people. Okay, was just getting some kind of a signal. Wasn't sure what it was. We are all, I'm reminded to tell you that we are all over the social media as Doc Owen Show, DOCOWENSHOW. That's my Twitter handle. We've got a Doc Owen Show Facebook page. There's a Doc Owen Show blog, docowenshow.com. And we have a Facebook page called Campus Connections, KAMPUS KONNECTION. So it's Campus Connection with 2 Ks. Put it in there because that's where we're going to direct you for comments and feedback, encouragement, discouragement if you prefer. The intent is to be interactive with a youthful audience. But, folks, but we're going to do it via social media. As you know, if you follow me on Twitter, I will follow you back, and you can direct message on Twitter. So any way you want to go about it, that's how we'll do it, but it will be all over social media. We, on the Doc Owen Show, have a traditional way of starting. Campus Connection is going to be no different. Campus Connection will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, a special Pledge of Allegiance, and you are about to hear it right now.
I remember a teacher that I had. Now, I went through the 7th grade. I went to the 7th grade. I left home when I was 10 years old because I was hungry. And I used to, this is true. I work in the summer and I go to school in the winter. But I had this one teacher. He was the principal of the Harrison School in Vincennes, Indiana. To me, this was the greatest teacher, a real sage of my time, anyhow. He had such wisdom. And we were all reciting the Pledge of Allegiance one day. And he walked over, this little old teacher. Mr. Laswell was his name. Mr. Laswell. And he says, he says, I've been listening to you boys and girls recite the Pledge of Allegiance all semester. And it seems as though it's becoming monotonous to you. If I may I recite it and try to explain to you the meaning of each word. I, me, an individual, a committee of one, pledge, dedicate all of my worldly goods to give without self-pity, allegiance, my love and my devotion to the flag, our standard, Old Glory, a symbol of freedom. Wherever she waves, there's respect, because your loyalty has given her a dignity that shouts freedom is everybody's job. United. That means that we have all come together. States, individual communities that have united into 48 great states. 48 individual communities with pride and dignity and purpose. All divided with imaginary boundaries, yet united to a common purpose, and that's love for country. And to the republic, a state in which sovereign power is invested in representatives chosen by the people to govern. And government is the people, and it's from the people to the leaders, not from the leaders to the people, for which it stands. One nation, meaning so blessed by God, indivisible, incapable of being divided, with liberty, which is freedom, the right of power to live one's own life without threats, fear, or some sort of retaliation. And justice, the principle or qualities of dealing fairly with others. for all. For all. Which means, boys and girls, it's as much your country as it is mine. And now, boys and girls, let me hear you recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Since I was a small boy, 2 states have been added to our country, and 2 words have been added to the Pledge of Allegiance: under God. Wouldn't it be a pity if someone said that is a prayer and that would be eliminated from schools too?
That's perhaps if you listen to that and listen to it closely, and as you well know as a young person, we do this as a podcast, so you can go to DocOwenShow.com or you can go to Doc Owen Show on Facebook and a number of various and sundry other places, but those are the 2 most direct hits to find the podcast. Or you can go to YouTube and look up Red Skelton's Pledge of Allegiance, and you'll come up with exactly what you just heard. And after you listen to that and you understand it, perhaps you will understand the frustration of a lot of Americans who, at any point, at any time, under any circumstances, do not condone the absence of honoring our flag. It's not about honoring the flag. It's about honoring the republic for which it stands. And you need to understand that we are very unique in this country as a republic. And if you haven't caught it, the tone and tenor of the Campus Connection is probably going to be, to the greatest extent, perhaps a little confrontational. I am not doing this show to run for cheerleader. I am not doing this show to be nice and win friends and influence people. I'm doing this show on the Campus Connection to provide a service. Our tagline on the Doc Owen Show is delivering truth to youth, and this is no exception. It simply has the focus of being about predominantly high school and college campuses, as well as high school and mostly college virtual environments or homeschool environments. Then after you mentally graduate from that area, you're welcome to join the Doc Owen Show. So, I kind of agree with Mr. Clint Eastwood, and I got to tell you, I didn't approve of his language, and I'm not going to repeat it. But all he said was that this particular young generation is a bunch of wimps. He didn't use that word. He used female anatomy, and I'm old school, so don't expect me to go there. I looked for the clip on YouTube, and apparently it's been taken down, perhaps because of the language, but it's just not out there. So let's dive into tonight's show and talk a bit about the presidential election, because it's everywhere. It's also on college campuses, and I got a kick out of what I found when I went out looking for information on that. One of them is from the Collegian at psu.edu, which I think is Penn State University, because that's what the article is about. It's a lot about Penn State. It says, historically, student political organizations on college campuses endorsed the candidate of their own party. Yet, like the rest of the 2016 election, history is not a reliable measure of expectations. This one is pretty strange. And I've been around doing this a long time, and I can assure you this one is extremely strange. There is no map to figure out where it has been and where it's going to go. So Penn State college Republicans followed in the footsteps of college Republicans at Harvard and Princeton and decided not to endorse the Republican nominee, Donald Trump. This was the first time Penn State college Republicans did not endorse the nominee of their party in the history of their organization. The reason that these organizations and many more are able to not endorse the candidate from their party is because their club constitutions do not require them to. Penn State College Republican Chairman Michael Straw said, listen to this closely. Although it states in the Constitution that we assist in the election of Republican candidates to local, state, and national office, this does not mean that we cement any endorsement for any Republican candidate running for office. So, in other words, they didn't endorse Trump just because the National Republican Party put him up as a candidate. They're not required to do that. All right? And here I'm going to expose a bit of ignorance. Everybody hates Trump. Matt Shapiro, executive director of Penn's Campus Republican organization, said to ABC News. While Republicans have shown signs of division, well, and basically, this young man, or now I guess you have to say this young person, obviously has some bad information, and I'll point that out to you in the next article. But listen to the difference. While college Republicans have shown signs of division, their Democrat counterparts are full steam ahead with endorsing their candidate, Hillary Clinton. Like the Republican organizations, these organizations also are not required to endorse their party's nominee for president. The purpose of the college Democrats shall be to promote both on campus and off the Democratic Party of the United States of America, its ideals and its philosophies. Moreover, the college Democrats shall encourage all university students to support the Democrat candidate and elected officials at the federal, state, and local level, the Penn State College Democrat Constitution says. Excuse me. The difference is the Democrats are encouraged, they are required, shall encourage all university students. Now, that's a completely different wording from the Republicans, and the reason the Democrats are so much stronger. I got a bit of a Clinton in my throat here or something. Let's break a little bit early for a sip of water, and we will be right back.
Did you ever look at the stains in your coffee cup and then realize that's exactly what happens to your teeth? Paraswabs is the 5-minute solution to get your teeth white without visiting the dentist. This is John Greenhut, the CEO of Paraswabs. And if your teeth are stained from coffee, tea, or smoking, all it takes is 5 minutes with Paraswabs. In 5 minutes, you'll see an average of 2 shades whiter teeth, and in 7 days, 6 shades. It's clinically proven to whiten natural teeth as well as caps and veneers. The secret is a tooth detergent that was developed by Dr. Martin Ginniger that lifts stains off of your teeth. Best of all, there's no messy strips or trays that you have to leave in your mouth for an hour. Just swab your teeth for 5 minutes and you're done. To try Paraswabs risk-free, call 1-800-975-4583. That's 1-800-975-4583. I guarantee your bright white smile will have your friends talking about how great you look. Try it risk-free today. 1-800-975-4583. That's 1-800-975-4583.
Howdy, folks. Welcome back or welcome aboard. You are listening to the Campus Connection by Doc Owen Show. Just before the break, we were talking about college political organizations, in particular on Penn State, that are not required to endorse the candidate of the Republican or the Democrat Party just because that's who the nominee is. And here's another one from Northwest Missouri. I guess it's state, Northwest Missouri State. Yep. The college Republican members around the nation are troubled with the decision of whether or not they want to endorse their party's nominee in this year's upcoming election. As stated on its website, College Republicans is the nation's oldest, largest, and most active youth political organization. So it's College Republicans nationwide, irrespective, and then they have local, on-campus organizations. It talks about the Harvard Republican Club stated that it is not endorsing Donald Trump after 128 years of supporting the Republican nominee. The oldest college Republican chapter in the country, founded in 1888, feels Trump does not embody the ideals set in the traditional Republican sense. Really? Brilliant deduction. And here's a quote from the Harvard Republican Club's statement. The rhetoric he espouses, from racist slander to misogynistic, however you pronounce it, taunts, is not consistent with our conservative principles, and his repeated mocking of the disabled and belittling of the sacrifices made by prisoners of war, Gold Star families, and Purple Heart recipients is not only bad politics, but absurdly cruel. It sounds to me like this young person formed their opinion based on MSNBC News or one of the other boob tube things that they've been trained to watch as they were children. And that's what keeps them still children. None, zero, nada, zip of that statement is true.
That's right.
He got into it one time and turned out with one particular Gold Star family member, and he turned out to be right. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure that was lost somewhere in the translation because you'd already made up your mind based on MSM information. Told you this wasn't a popularity contest. Northwest Missouri State sophomore Matt Holy believes the electoral system is working against us. This is a doozy. I feel like the system we have doesn't fit anybody's exact political ideas. That's by design, Matt. Trump especially is the embodiment of this. He's taking all of the Republican ideals to the extreme. Let's build a fence, extradite everybody, and all the other crazy stuff he's tried to pull out. And by the way, extradite is when you have a criminal in another country and the United States reaches out and asks for that or the country where he's committed the crime files a legal brief that asks for the extradition to bring him back home. So he's just a sophomore. Maybe in the next couple of years he'll learn the proper use of words in English. And the Republicans have been satisfied with the previous presidential candidates, Holy said. Yeah, but maybe the rest of the country is not because they didn't win. So the Republicans may well have been very satisfied with their candidates, but they aren't winners. Then a Northwest Missouri State senior, so there is some hope in there, Angela Luna, supports Trump because she has no other choice. However, she said, I'm supporting Donald Trump because I refuse to elect Hillary Clinton, Luna said. I really like Gary Johnson, but voting third party doesn't work. If you did a little research on Mr. Gary Johnson, the Libertarian Party candidate, I'm not so sure you'd be too crazy about him. Mm-mm. But he's definitely got the socially liberal, the liberal attitude on social issues such as marijuana and illegal immigration or open borders that an awful lot of young people like. They really do. They are, I won't say that they're in favor of it, but they're not nearly as opposed to it as the previous generations are. That's just the way it is. Let's talk just briefly about a thing that I learned when I was doing this research on the college campuses called trigger warnings. I'd never heard of that before. I had no idea what that meant. which means I had to go look it up, right? And what it's talking about is, it's kind of, as one of the professors said that was quoted, it's like a heads up. In other words, it's when the professor or the university comes out and says, you may not want to take this course because it might offend you, right? And if I'm a college student, or if I'm have a child that's in college, I want them offended from time to time. I want them to be pressed. I want them to have to think about things and learn about things that they're not familiar with. You know, and test their beliefs to a certain extent. And it kind of helps seeing what they're made of, as opposed to running a race where everybody gets a ribbon. You know, there are winners and there are losers. Mm-hmm. End of story. The University of Chicago is welcoming new students to campus by warning them that they might hear things that might make them uncomfortable. A letter sent by the school this week, before the beginning of school, tells incoming freshmen that the university does not support trigger warnings as part of its commitment to freedom of expression. In other words, there's going to be stuff that comes up, and you're just going to have to deal with it. You know, some of the professors do trigger warnings, but the university says don't expect it. It's not part of our policy. So, and interestingly enough, it says, "Dear class of 2020 student," that's how the welcome letter starts off from the school's dean of students. It goes on to explain the university's commitment to freedom of expression and inquiry. Students are encouraged to speak, write, listen, challenge, and learn without fear of censorship, which is interesting. Right across town at DePaul University, they had to cancel a brief for a presentation by a well-known young conservative when a protest broke out during the middle of the meeting. They didn't cancel it before he got there, but they were ill-prepared to deal with it when it happened, and they had to stop the meeting with Milo Yiannopoulos. So, anyway, that was at DePaul that they had to cancel that. I just find this whole idea of trigger warnings or heads up kind of offensive, and yet that's exactly what I did at the beginning of the show. Did you catch that? I can't understand why. Here's one that from University of Chicago. I can't understand why a college campus would be the kind of place where people would police uncomfortable topics or topics that should be. Carter says this is the place that they should be having those discussions. All right. The word trigger warning and the word safe place also implies something for people that have been in abusive or traumatic situations. In other words, that's where the both of those terminologies came from, and the politically correct crowd is totally abusing them. This is also about that thing at the University of Chicago. They sent a strongly worded letter to incoming freshmen, is what it says. It talks about what a trigger warning is in an academic setting. They are written or spoken warnings given by professors to alert students that course material might be traumatic for people with particular life experiences. And they are welcome to step out of class, although they will be responsible for the material that's discussed in their absence. Okay? So, if it's going to bother you, you can leave class, but you better get some notes from somebody that had enough guts and gumption to sit there and learn. But beyond rape and violence, students have asked for warnings about issues including abortion, racism, and homophobia. And some say the demands have gone too far. Jonathan Zimmerman, a professor of education and history at New York University, mocked trigger warnings in a fake syllabus for his introduction to United States history. I thought this was clever, but I'm sure it made somebody mad. Regarding the course discussion of World War II, for instance, he wrote, "No need for Germans, Italians, or Japanese, or their descendants to show up. We won, they lost." Any questions? So there's some professors out there who still have a bit of a sense of humor, and hopefully their students did too. Mr. Johnston went on to say that he used trigger warnings on his syllabi for the past 2 years. He calls them content notes. All right. My students haven't heard of the term trigger warnings, but they have heard of content notes. In other words, what to expect. They do talk about that the use of these warnings is increasing and getting more and more off the charts in terms of what this wimp group of students is willing to put up with and not be confronted with. The trigger warnings have become a staple of arguments suggesting that political correctness has run amok in higher education. I'm going to read to you some information in just a little while that'll help you understand that political correctness has totally run amok in some institutions. Shortly after the Democratic National Convention, there was published an interview with some young college student Democrats. And I thought that I would relay one of them to you in particular. And it comes from a young lady by the name of Catalina Velasquez. So we understand that we have never had a fully participatory democracy. We understand that democracy, the way it's defined in the United States, has been about contracting, disenfranchising. The more we disenfranchise, the better, and we are tired of it. Velasquez is the director of Young People 4, a group, that's the name of the group, a group that declares on its website that it is, quote, taking a stand for progressive ideas. Earlier in the event, Velasquez got enthusiastic applause after her boasts of being undocumented and unafraid, and transgender and unashamed. Nor was the earlier statement the sum of Velasquez's criticisms about the United States. We are really looking introspectively about how this country came about, Velasquez said. This country is built off the backs of native indigenous people, the genocide of such. This country is built off the backs of black people. This country is built on the backs of immigrant labor. Ms. Velasquez, I am terribly sorry that you have been given such a negative impression of how this country was built. I would submit to you, yes, immigrants built it. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. All of the immigrants. And there are doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, major politicians who are descendants of those immigrants that busted their ass so that you would have the privilege to do as you please.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome aboard.
That's right.
But what was striking about the account Velasquez gave was, by memory, the complete absence of any mention of the strikingly great parts of our country's history. And, of course, the view that somebody who came to the United States illegally should not only be entitled to live here, but also to vote. If you want to know more about Daco and Show, and illegal immigration. Tune into Saint Cities by Doc Owen Show, which is also out there on a once-a-week basis. We've got two specialty shows. We end the week with Doc Owen Show, which is our flagship. We have two shows earlier in the week, Monday and Wednesday. Monday is Saint Cities by Doc Owen Show. It's focused on sanctuary cities and illegal immigration issues. And then we have this show in the middle of the week called the Campus Konnection by Doc Owen Show, which is by, for, and about young people and where they are, what they need to know, and feedback that we get from them. We're coming up on about a half an hour. Let's take another little 1 minute sip of water, and we'll be right back.
In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 877-212-5898. Again, 877-212-5898. That's 877-212-5898. 877-212-5898.
Howdy, folks. Welcome back or welcome aboard. You are listening to the Campus Konnection by Doc Owen Show, our weekly version of...
Yahoo!
Somebody just hit the jackpot. This one is about, and you know, I got to tell you, I'm having a bit of an issue with this one, and I may want to chime in on this one and a couple more that are going to come up. In recent years, rape has become the only assault of human or natural origin for which it is now wrong to offer advice to would-be victims that might help them avoid becoming have-been victims. As an example, we have rules to protect you from robbery, rules to protect you from drowning, rules to protect you from murder, and rules to protect you from being devoured by a bear. No one thinks that because this advice is out there, it means they are somehow being blamed for falling victim to one of these unpleasantries. But no, rape is special, and even the mere suggestion that there is anything a woman can do to avoid being raped is pure patriarchal oppression. In other words, anytime it is suggested that things might be done to avoid being raped, to not putting yourself in that situation, the pushback is that we're trying to blame it on the victim. And that's not the case. Just because advice is being offered, and that's what this author is saying, that this is the only thing where that becomes the issue, is the fact that we're even offering the advice. Mm-hmm. You follow me? Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring this up is because Stanford University removed an insensitive guide on women and alcohol. And it talked about the fact that a female body metabolizes alcohol differently, and you're going to get drunk more quickly than you think a female is, especially if you're keeping up with men. That's how you get in trouble. You're a limping gazelle, and predators exist. So it recommends that you keep a few other gazelles around. All right? But that was entirely too sexist. It was entirely too, over the top for the feminists on Stanford University campus. And they hit the roof. And they finally forced the university, and it says, next thing you know, we'll hear that it's patronizing to advise hikers to stay away from dangerous animals. That it's victim blaming to tell children to avoid talking to strangers. But anyway, nonetheless, they were successful in their quest, not only to have Stanford University take the advice down, but to apologize for ever putting it up in the first place. Stanford should have stood their ground. They really should have stood their ground. Political correctness. Here's a cutie for you. No pun intended. A university is putting free tampons in men's restrooms with the quote that not all people who menstruate are women. I'll wait for the laughter to die down. The student government at Brown University also wants to make sure that transgender individuals have access to feminine hygiene products. I don't understand that. I mean, I know I'm a little naive on these matters, but I don't understand that at all. Forget what you learned in middle school biology. That was so 1950s and bigoted and anti-science. Women aren't the only people who have periods now. As long as that person identifies as a male, he'll have his own time of the month and need tampons or pads or whichever he prefers. So, in other words, there's a female who thinks they're a male that is going to go into the male, as a result, they're going to go into the male restroom and expect to be treated like a female.
That's insane.
Brown University. Coming to a campus near you. And the reason we bring up these odd lot things from universities around the country is, if it happens at one, then it just becomes, it goes from university, it just spreads like wildfire. And everybody has to get in the game, and one university organization finds out about it, tells their buddies that go to another university, et cetera, and it just goes on from there. Remember me saying something just a little bit earlier about political correctness running amok? Well, that wasn't the end of it. George Washington University, up east, outside of Washington, D.C., has hired a former Al-Qaeda recruiter and propagandist to work as a research fellow at its Center for Cyber and Homeland Security. Isn't that nice?
That's special.
Seamus Hughes, deputy director of the program on extremism at the center, told CNN that Jesse Morton, formerly known as Yunus Abdullah Mohammed, now goes by Jesse Morton. Give me a break. Brings a unique perspective to counterterrorism work and could help reach that individual who's going down the path of radicalization. Yeah, he's going to reach that person going down the path of radicalization and put them to good use. Doesn't say anything about reforming them. It's just going to reach out to them and say, okay, I got a good one here. You need to go talk to an old friend of mine down at that building with the dome on it.
ISIS commander or something.
We haven't figured out how to reach that individual who's going down the path of radicalization, Hughes said. Jesse has been in that world and got out of that world. That's the hard part for me. Hughes added that Morton is a new man, reformed after his time in federal prison. Well, maybe. I trust him, he said. We did our due diligence because we know that the federal government is, they're lockstep, man. Anything they take on, they do it first class. They nail it, on time, on budget, to functional specifications. They got it. Not necessarily. Okay, so federal prison may not be the best place. He was sentenced in 2012. Oh, this is good. This is how good he was. He was a co-founder and chief propagandist of Revolution Muslim, a New York City-based group active in the 2000s. He helped to insert the narrative of al-Qaeda and Salafi jihadist ideology into the American ambit. The biography reads, what's an ambit? After his incarceration in 2011, Morton de-radicalized, and today he rejects Salafi jihadi and Islamist theology. Okay, good, thanks. But this is good. He was sentenced in 2012 to 11 years or more in prison, but was released in February 2015 after less than 3 years behind bars. Does the term pay off ring a bell? Okay. Now, stop and think for a minute of all of the things that we've just been through, all the things that we've just talked about, and kind of try to follow the dots along. Now I'm going to tell you something that will it just absolutely freaked me out. And it tells me that political correctness, which by the way is kind of it's really both parties are guilty of it. So I can't blame it on one party or the other. But all of the social change and all of the freedom that comes about when you don't have good moral standards in place are being driven by one particular party. End of discussion. And they have been for generations. All right? I remember, and you can go look it up in your history book, all of the conflict that occurred in the early 60s when we were integrating by force of federal government. There was a lot of pushback to the integration. It might surprise you to know that there was even some pushback on the other side, on the black side. I mean, not nearly as much as there was on the white, no doubt. And they deserved a lot of the things that they got without being too fancy. They deserved a better education. They deserved better schools. They deserved an awful lot of things. That was all the reason or the push for the integration was. There were two bases of economics going on when it came to supporting the two different school systems. And it just made sense to put it all together and let everybody rise up. We got that. There was not an argument about that, right? It was challenging. I was not part of it. It happened after I graduated from high school. I became instantly part of it when I got to the Naval Academy, because the Naval Academy was and still is colorblind. I mean, it's the military service. But in 1963, College Station, Texas, was not integrated. It integrated shortly thereafter. But it's a hard-fought battle. What would you say if I told you that California State University, Los Angeles, honored the demands of its black student union and created segregated housing to shield black students from microaggressions? Segregated housing will now be available to black students at California State University, Los Angeles, as a means of combating microaggressions and racially insensitive remarks. I want payback for all the racially insensitive remarks I've heard in my life. And trust me, they're numerous. School officials have honored requests by black students, CSLA's Black Student Union, and will offer housing space delegated, it says, for black students at the Halisi Scholars Black Living Learning Community. Some of the demands issued by CSLA's Black Student Union include a $30 million scholarship endowment to assist black students, a new anti-discrimination policy, and cultural competency course for faculty and students. And that's what the College Fix reported. So this is 2016. That'd be about 50 years that these black students want to roll back.
That's what I was thinking.
I don't understand. I mean, put this together with trigger warnings. Put this together with all of the pushback from the college political activity groups. All right. I mean, and it's culminating on the left coast out there in segregated housing. And they wonder why the rest of the world thinks that it's dysfunctional. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. How do we get out of it? How do we get around it? I can tell you on a real close-up and personal level some of the things that I've observed about more recent college graduates that is really, really not becoming. And it has to do with, some of it has to do with color, some of it has to do with ethnicity, an awful lot of it has to do with age. There is no respect coming out of this young bunch.
That's true.
No respect. And I'm real sorry if you think we're a bunch of old fuddy-duddies. And I can assure you, I thought my parent and grandparents were a bunch of old fuddy-duddies too. When it was time for me to take over, I didn't understand why they just didn't go sit down over in the corner and watch. I mean, I get that, and it was real frustrating. But I can assure you, I never showed the level of disrespect that is out there in today's world for the folks that went ahead of me.
If I acted like that, I probably wouldn't have any more teeth, for sure.
And it has to do with political correctness. It has to do with a generation that's been coddled, that has been, everybody, we call it everybody gets a ribbon. It's like, if you just show up, you're going to win the same thing that the fastest person on the field won, because they don't want to offend anybody. It's the same group that the teachers went through not being allowed to use red ink anymore. They had to use purple. They had to use something different because red indicated failure. Yes. It does. It can. Too much of it certainly can indicate failure.
That's for sure.
But it's that way in business. Red ink in business, too much red ink in business means you failed.
You're in trouble.
What better time to learn that than when you're trying to write a complete sentence in the second grade? Go ahead and get it over with. In closing, there are a couple of articles here about college graduates weigh in on the value of higher education. And this is something to think about, because on a personal note and from an experiential point of view, not everyone needs or is going to get a high degree of value out of a college education. And that's okay. They're not to be looked down upon. They're simply making a life choice. And if they're happy with the direct, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be hugely successful. I mean, it will be rare. You have the further you go with a formal education, the more likely you are to experience things that will be advantageous to you as you grow older to make sound decisions. But it's not an absolute requirement. particularly in today's world. On the other hand, in today's world, it's even easier to get more education. You can go online. You can do virtual schools, and some of them are very, very good. You have to be disciplined like an adult. You got to be ready to. I mean, when the professor says it's due on Sunday night, it's due on Sunday night.
Right.
You can't procrastinate just because you don't have to go to class. So it's the ones that are kind of freewheeling in terms of when stuff is due. They're not. It's called they're unpaced. It's not paced learning. Paced learning in a virtual environment works real well. Unpaced does not, because when there's no pressure to get it done by a certain date, you just put it off and you don't get it done. So, but in talking about the value of a college education, here were some students who chose the University of Maryland, major in political science. I had absolutely no idea what I was jumping into when I decided to attend college. And going to UMD was about getting to know people with completely different experiences from my own. That came from a senior in political science. Graduated in 2016. Here's another one, graduated from college in 2015 and is currently working. I always thought that going to college was getting that higher degree, to be the first in my family, to get a college education. But I realized I grew a lot at the university, socially, emotionally, and definitely mentally. And that's what it's about, is the opportunity to grow up in somewhat of a non-threatening environment. You know, and
like I always say, it kind of gives you dimension to your life instead of just being on the surface.
Yes, exactly right. And finally, I subscribe to a thing called educationdive.com, which is a daily blast for people in the education field, okay, about what's going on out there. And it said that economist Carlos Salerno wrote in the Huffington Post that allowing the U.S. Department of Education to grant degrees based upon the number of courses completed, regardless of transfers or the number of institutions, is a way to generate more value and decrease costs for students. As we know, a lot of times if you, by result of having to move, go to various and sundry different schools, you wind up taking courses you didn't need to take, or you'll have a whole lot more invested than if you just stay in the same place. So what he's talking about is to creating some mobility for what you've already invested in your education and letting it go. Follow you and not follow the college. And it's not altogether a bad idea. All right? We were coming down on the wind-up, and that wasn't much about that article, but maybe we'll get into it next time. It's a good idea. It's a good model. It has to do. It's similar to healthcare.
I could see that.
Yeah, it could work. But I don't know about the feds managing it. That's the only thing that might cause it to break down.
They gotta let that tentacle go.
Yep. So I hope you've enjoyed the third version of Campus Connection. We're going to continue to try to stay in your face a bit, and at the same time bring you knowledge and information that you can use. Please connect with us. Front row. Time to go. You have been listening to the Doc Owen Show. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. Now go out there this week and take care, pay attention, and God bless.
Bye-bye, folks. God bless.